Hello friend, welcome back to my channel. How are you today? I hope you're doing well. It's Tim here, and in this video, I'm going to guide you through the steps to create this Easter-inspired landscape painting. I used to love watching Peter Cottontail when I was a kid at Easter. It's a pretty old claymation movie, and it's pretty silly, but Pierre was always my favorite character, and I thought it would be really cute to do something inspired by the movie. This is a very beginner-friendly painting as well, and we're going to be covering a lot of different topics and techniques in this one, so I can't wait to begin. So if you recreate this painting and are on Instagram, I would absolutely love to see it, so please tag me at Timstar Studio. Upcoming here are the hex codes for the two palettes of colors that we're going to use in this video. I broke it up into two because the egg colors just took up too much space for just one palette, so that made it a little bit easier. Here are the main brushes that we're going to use. All of them are available in the Procreate default library, except for the damp brush, which is still available on Pocket Procreate, but if you don't have access to it, I do have a video up on my channel on how to recreate a version of that brush from scratch, so if you need it, definitely go check it out. The first step of our tutorial is to take a screenshot of this trace outline layer and then paste it into a square-sized canvas on Procreate. You're going to turn the opacity of it down and fit the image to the screen using the lasso tool. Then you're going to add a new layer and then trace over top of it so that way you have a guide for your painting. Please feel free to take any breaks that you might need along the way, and when you're ready, let's begin. So let's start by painting the sky. Alright, so let's turn our trace layer down. Let's turn it down to around... Let's do about 10% like usual. Let's add a new layer and put that layer underneath the trace layer. Let's use the third color in the first row, this shade of light blue, and let's fill in the entire canvas with this color. Zoom up here. Let's add another new layer. Let's put this layer into soft light. Let's switch over to using the paintbrush now with the damp brush. Let's use about 10% brush size with about 74% opacity. Let's use the second color in the first row, the shade of black. And starting on the left-hand side in the upper left-hand corner, we're going to paint a little stripe of color starting from the top and going to about right here, the bottom of the trees. Let's paint a line of color along the top here, just like this. And then on this right side, we're going to paint a line along the right-hand side, ending right about here. Now let's use Gaussian blur and blur this layer to around 32%. Now let's paint the clouds. And in this upcoming section, we're going to be using a combination of circular and tight scrubbing paint strokes to create our clouds. These are going to be very hazy and kind of indistinct clouds too, so nothing too detailed. These are my favorite clouds to paint. Now let's add a new layer. Let's switch back over to the paintbrush now again. Let's do like 6% brush size with about 87% opacity. Let's use the first color in the first row, the color white. And now along the cloud area here, using circular scrubbing paint motions, we're gonna paint along our cloud outline and start filling that area in. I'm going to come back underneath here and add another layer of clouds. Kind of crossing over where our rainbow will be here in just a moment. And let's fill this bottom edge out here. Just like that. Nothing too distinct or detailed quite yet. Let's come over here. Starting right around the middle here again. Just continuing to use our circular scrubbing paint motions to finish filling out our cloud outline edge. Let's add another row of clouds right around here. And now we're going to blend them out using the same paint strokes that we used to create them. Now let's switch over to the blending tool now with the damp brush as well. So use about 11% brush size with around 43% opacity. Now starting up here on the left-hand edge, we're going to lightly buff and blend this edge out. Ever so lightly there, and just continuing to do that right across the painting. Now I'm going to come up underneath and lightly buff that edge out, just kind of smoking it out just a little bit. I'm going to come up under here, continue to kind of blend that area out till we kind of get a smoky haze. Now I'm going to add another new layer. Let's switch back over to the damp brush now with the paintbrush. About 3% brush size. Let's do full opacity, still with the color white, which is the first color in the first row. And now we're going to add some smaller details to our clouds. And along that edge again, let's add just a little bit of highlight detail using the same paint strokes as before. Just along the top edge here, working our way back up to the top. And to reset the stamp pattern and make your brush more opaque, just lift it up and continue painting. This brush is set to kind of trail off, so it will get lighter the longer you use it. Now I'm going to bring that back over here. Finishing up this edge. Let's add just a little bit of detail right here. Let's add a little bit right here. And let's do a little right here. Let's finish up along this edge here. Now I'm going to remove our trace outline for just a moment, so let's turn this layer off. Let's make a copy canvas layer and paste over the top. Now switching back over to the blending tool with the damp brush, about 4% brush size with about 44% opacity again. We're going to lightly buff and blend out our clouds, kind of removing any of the stamp pattern left. And I'm kind of just buffing that bottom edge into the haze. And then here along the top, just kind of softening that up just a little bit, kind of leaving a blend of hard edges and soft edges. And then I'm going to repeat that along here. Just kind of smoking that out a little bit and then smoking that out along the bottom. Let's move over just a little bit and we're going to repeat that same step, moving across. Kind of leaving a blend between hard edges and soft edges, not removing and completely blending it out. And let's finish this off on this other side here, right along the bottom. Softening that edge up. Removing the remnants of the brush pattern. That just drives me crazy. It's just those little things. Let's finish blending out this bottom edge. Just kind of marrying all of those colors and textures together. And when you're happy, let's zoom back here. Let's turn our trace outline layer back on. Let's add another new layer. Let's zoom up here. Now let's switch over to the paintbrush now with the soft airbrush. Let's do like 9% brush size with full opacity. Now let's paint the rainbow. Let's use the third color in the fourth row, this shade of red. And starting along this rainbow edge curve here, we're gonna paint an upside down sad face. And then if you hold it down, it will correct the shape. Just like that. Now let's use the fourth color in the fourth row, the shade of orange. And now slightly overlapping the red color, we're going to paint another line, another sad face underneath of it, just like this. Now with the fifth color in the fourth row, we're going to repeat that same step, painting another sad face underneath the last, slightly overlapping the orange, holding it down to autocorrect the shape. Now let's grab the sixth color in the fourth row and repeat that step. Just like that. We're going to repeat that same step with the first color in the fifth row, the shade of blue. And then using the second color in the fifth row, let's repeat that, finishing off with that color purple down here at the bottom. Now let's use Gaussian blur and blur that layer to around 16%. Now upcoming here is an important step. We're going to create a copy of this rainbow layer to use for later. Now using the lasso tool in uniform mode, I'm going to make our rainbow just a little bit bigger. And I'm going to move it just a little bit there. Now let's paint the mountain. Now let's add a new layer using the paintbrush with the technical pen. Let's use around 57–58% or so size and full opacity. Now let's use the fourth color in the first row, this dark shade of blue. And we're going to outline our mountains here, just like this. Now along this bottom edge here, where the top of the grass will be, let's just quickly fill that in. Now using color drop, let's fill this shape in. Let's add a new layer. Let's switch over to using the paintbrush now, and let's use the water pen. Let's do around 10% brush size with full opacity. We're going to turn our trace outline layer up just a little bit. I'm going to turn the opacity up to around 16% just to make it a little easier to see. Now on that bottom layer we just added, switching back to the paintbrush, let's use the fifth color in the first row, this dark shade of green. And now we're going to paint our trees. Now in this upcoming section, we're going to be using the water pen to paint our trees with, using up and down zigzag paint strokes that are random, fast, and very close together. You'll want to make sure you vary the heights of each zigzag too to create the illusion of shorter and taller trees within the row. And then we're going to blend them out using the blending tool with the same technique. Now starting here on this left side edge, over top of the mountain, let's create a line, filling that into the edge. Now let's use color drop and fill this entire shape in. Now let's use Gaussian blur and blur this layer to around 19%. I'm going to zoom up here. Now using the paintbrush now, using up and down cross-hatching-ish zigzag paint strokes of varying heights, let's start painting our trees. Just kind of following our trace outline edge, making sure to create some higher and lower trees just to create the illusion of a forest here. Just like that. Now I'm going to fill in this bottom edge, connecting those two areas here. After you get that filled in, let's use the sixth color in the first row, this lighter shade of dark green. And just along this upper edge here, still using the same size brush, we're going to add a little bit of color variation just along the top edge. Just like this. When you reach the side, let's switch back over to the blending tool now. And we're actually going to switch over to the water pen using the blending tool. Let's use like 5% brush size with full opacity. I'm going to close this here for just a second. Now starting on this left-hand side again, going kind of exaggerating the motion just a little bit more. Just along this upper edge here, we're going to start blending it out. Using the same paint strokes that we used to create them to blend them out with. Which creates the illusion of multiple layers of trees here in just a moment. It's a really cool effect that we're creating here. Now along this bottom edge, we're going to create another row of trees. So we're going to start here in the middle and kind of drag from the middle to the bottom, kind of crossing over that area we just created. Which will create the illusion of multiple rows of trees. I'm going to turn the trace outline layer off for a moment. Now let's create a duplicate of this layer. And I'm actually going to turn the duplicate layer down to around 58% or so. Let's merge these two layers back together, and I'm going to turn the trace outline layer back on. Now let's paint the backfield. Okay, let's switch back over to the paintbrush, and let's switch over to using the damp brush. About 5% brush size with about 64% opacity. Let's use the third color in the second row. Now using our sad face highlight. And the sad face highlight is just a silly name I created for a slightly curved, downturned scrubbing paint stroke I use a lot in my painting that to me kind of looks like a sad face, but this is a really great and helpful painting technique to paint grass and landscapes with. Starting here on the right-hand side and going back and forth. With a very light hand, we're going to start creating the illusion of some grass. And we're going to work our way from top to bottom here. Just like that. And then moving over here to the middle, kind of connecting those two areas, allowing just a little bit of that undercolor from the background to show through. And then finishing off here on the left-hand side. Now let's switch over to using the blending tool now. We're going to switch over to the damp brush as well. Let's use like 6% brush size, about 36% or so in opacity. Now I'm going to turn the trace outline layer off for a moment. Now using the same paint strokes that we used to paint with, we're going to use those same paint strokes to blend it out. Very, very lightly. And we are allowing just a little bit of the texture still to show through. We don't want to completely blend it away. We're just kind of marrying the entire area together. And we're going to work our way over here. And finishing off on this side right here. Now let's add a new layer. Let's switch back over to the paintbrush. Let's go like 4% brush size with 58% opacity. Now using the fourth color in the second row, this light shade of green, we're going to repeat this same process using our sad face highlights, working our way from top to bottom to start creating our grass. Ending off where we did before. Now we're going to work our way over here and repeat the same steps here in the middle, adding even more areas of highlight and visual interest to this area, which will create a really nice effect for your grass. And then we're going to finish that off right here, still allowing just a little bit of that undercolor still to show through. Kind of creates a nice rolling hills kind of look, which I really like. Now using the blending tool again, still with the damp brush, let's do 6% brush size and about 28% opacity. Using the same paint strokes we just used, we're going to lightly blend over this area, just kind of softening that up just a little bit. Not too much though. Now let's paint the flowers. And for this upcoming section, I did find it helpful to hold the stylus or eye pencil you're using straight up and down to tap with, rather than holding it sideways. You will get more precise dots that way. If you hold it sideways, you'll end up with small lines rather than dots. Now let's add a new layer. Still using the damp brush, let's use like 4% brush size. Let's do full opacity. Now let's use the fifth color in the second row, this darker shade of yellow, and starting up here, and we're going to work our way in rows here. Now we're going to create clusters of dots, and we're going to use the same type of paint stroke that we used to create the sad face highlight with, only in dots. So kind of like this. working our way down. We'll repeat that, moving over just a little bit. Now I'm going to move over here. And along the top, I'm kind of randomizing the highs and lows of where each clusters of dots are going to be. And now let's repeat that, working our way down, finishing off about right here, and then working our way over, kind of connecting those two areas. And I am allowing just a little bit of that green still to show through underneath. And then repeating this on the left-hand side. Now, let's use hue and saturation and turn that down just a little bit. Let's turn the brightness down to around 45%. Let's add another new layer. Still using the same color. Let's shrink our brush size down to around 2%. And then starting here in the center, we're going to repeat these same steps, only with these smaller dots. And we're still allowing some of that green still to show underneath. We're just kind of adding a nice little highlight there on top. And then we're going to repeat this over here, working our way over to the right. And I kind of started working in rows here to make it a little bit easier. That way when you go to connect it, we're kind of repeating the same amount of... We're repeating the same process going across all over. That way it stays consistent. And then we're working our way over to the left using the same paint strokes. Kind of connecting those two areas together, marrying all of our textures and colors. Let's add another new layer. And now zooming up here, let's use the 6th color in the 2nd row here. And I'm going to shrink our brush size to around 2%. And we're going to use this color very sparingly and just create a couple of little cluster detail areas of this brighter color. Kind of just adding nice little random detail dots every so often, still allowing a little bit of that grass color still to show through underneath. And then working our way over to the left-hand edge. And I do find it helpful in this area to keep your stylus or whatever you were painting with like straight up and down, to keep them more as dots rather than like that, because it's easy for that shape to happen. So if you keep the stylus straight up and down, you'll get more of a dot shape, which is what you want. And then around the front here, I'm adding just some very sparing, thinner row of dots just to create kind of the creep of the flowers moving down. Now along this back edge here, starting on the left side, I'm just going to add a couple of random detail dots along the back edge just to create some pretty little details here across the back. Just like that. Now when you're happy, let's create another copy canvas layer and paste. Let's turn on our trace outline layer again. Now let's add a new layer. And now let's paint the front field. And I wanted to say a huge thank you before we continue for supporting my channel. I hope you guys are enjoying the tutorial so far, and I invite you to like, comment, and subscribe. Please let me know too below what your favorite part so far has been. Let's switch over to using the paintbrush now with the soft airbrush. Let's use like 25% brush size with full opacity, and I'm going to turn my outline here, and actually I'm going to turn our trace outline layer up a little bit, that way it's easier to see. Kind of losing it amongst all the flowers. So let's move back to that layer. Let's use the 5th color in the first row, that dark shade of green again, and let's outline that back edge layer just to kind of sharpen it up a little bit. Now let's switch over to using the paintbrush now with the damp brush again. Let's use like 4% brush size, 72% opacity. Now let's use the first color in the second row. And along this top edge, using our sad face highlight. I'm going to start on the left-hand side. We're going to work our way from top to bottom, adding a little bit of grass color contour, just like that. Now let's add a little bit over here, just along that edge. And then connecting the two areas. Now let's add another new layer. Let's use the 4th color in the second row, that lightest shade of green. Let's switch our opacity and turn it down to around 53%. And starting on that left-hand side again, add just a little bit more highlight. Just brightening our grass up just a little bit, allowing a little bit of that undercolor still to show through. Now I'm going to turn our trace outline layer off. See how it's looking here. And I'm just going to kind of clean up that edge just a little bit. And I'm not bringing the grass completely up to this line here. I want to leave a little bit of distinction between this area and this area. So let's get rid of that there. Let's switch over to using the blending tool now with the damp brush. Let's do like 7% brush size, 29% opacity. And for whatever reason, I find it helps to turn my canvas, so you'll see me doing that a lot. But we're just going to lightly blend out over this area here, just like that. Now let's paint the grass. Let's create another copy canvas layer and paste. Let's switch over to the blending tool now with the water pen, about 3% brush size with full opacity. And now starting on this left-hand side, using short little flicks, going to the left and to the right, kind of in random patterns. And you want to make sure they're short. We're going to start painting some grass texture for our meadow. Just like this. And I'm going to work in rows here to make it a little bit easier again, grabbing color from the top and dragging it into the bottom areas and from the bottom into the top. This will create some really nice depth and texture for our painting here. I love painting grass. It's so monotonous, but it's so relaxing. I hope you guys are enjoying the tutorial so far. I had a lot of fun creating this one, so I hope you guys are having fun painting. And we're just repeating the same pattern, working our way down. When you reach the bottom, we're going to move over here to the right and repeat the same process, working our way over to the right-hand edge now. Now let's paint the Easter Bunny. Let's turn on our trace outline layer again, and now it's time to paint our bunny. Let's turn the trace outline layer up. Now let's add a new layer on the top. And to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to hit Canvas and we're going to turn on our drawing guide. And let's go to Edit Drawing Guide. Let's choose Symmetry. And we're going to move, oops. Let's try that again. Let's move that right into the center here where his nose is. This will make painting this a lot easier for you and a lot faster. So let's switch over to using the technical pen now. Let's do like 35% brush size with full opacity. Let's grab the third color in the third row. Let's turn Drawing Assist on. And Drawing Assist is this magical little option that'll mirror what we're painting on one side onto the other. So let's turn this on here, just like that. And let's fill in our outline. Then let's fill in this whole shape. Now let's turn Drawing Assist off. And let's fill in the bunny tail. Now, if I did not turn the assist off there, he would have a tail on this side too, which you do not want. Unless you want a two-tailed bunny, which is perfectly fine. Let's put this underneath here. Let's add another new layer on top, and let's put this in Drawing Assist again. Now let's grab the fifth color in the third row. Now let's outline the inner ear color. And let's use Color Drop and fill that in. Let's fill in his nose here, just like this. Now using the sixth color in the third row, the slightest shade of pink, we're going to fill in his cheeks. And fill that in here, just like that. Now using the first color in the first row again, let's outline his eyes, the whole shape, and let's fill that in. Now we're going to move this layer underneath. Let's add another new layer on top. I'm not going to put this one in Drawing Assist. Still using the technical pen. Let's up it to like 43, 44% brush size. Now using the fourth color in the third row, let's outline this eye and fill it in. I like outlining each eye separately. It just looks a little bit better like that. Now let's grab the first color in the fourth row and let's outline his bow tie. And then using Color Drop with that same color, let's go ahead and fill that in. Now I'm going to turn our trace outline layer off. Oh, he's looking so cute. Now if you have a little bit of overlap here on the eye, I'm going to take the fourth color again and just kind of fill up that area and soften that. Round that edge out just a little bit more. Let's go ahead and move that down. Now with these three layers, let's go back down to the original base layer of the bunny. Let's add a new layer so there's one in between the face details and the body. Now let's use the first color in the first row again and switch back over to using the damp brush. Do like 4% brush size, 57% or so in opacity. Now using scrubbing paint strokes just here around the edges and in the center, we're going to create a little highlight for the center of the face here, just like this. We're going to leave the edges still here a little bit darker. We're going to create a little highlight on the tail. Now here on the body, it might help to turn the trace outline layer on. I'm going to put some highlight here in the body area. And I'm going to follow this down into the first leg. And then into the second leg. And then finishing up on the right-hand side. And then kind of connecting the head highlight to the body highlight. I'm going to put a little bit of highlight here on the ears. Now I'm going to turn our trace outline layer off. Yeah, that gave him a little bit more shape here. So let's switch over to the blending tool with the damp brush again. About 4% brush size, 32% or so opacity. And we're just going to lightly soften these new highlight areas up, just following the shapes that we created. Just kind of softening those up a little bit. Then softening the head highlights up. And then the highlight on the ears. Just kind of using circular scrubbing paint strokes to soften those up. I'm going to zoom back just a little bit. I'm going to turn this highlight layer down just a little bit to around 74%. Okay, let's turn our trace outline layer back on. I just realized I don't have the basket color, so give me just a moment here. Now let's paint the Easter basket. Okay, now that I have my basket color, sorry about that. You guys already have the color, but I forgot to move it over from an old palette version that I created for this, and I forgot to move it over. So let's switch back over to using the technical pen with the paintbrush. Let's go like 31% brush size with full opacity. Using the 5th color in the 5th row. Now, to make this a little bit easier again, let's add a new layer on top of the trace outline layer. I'm going to put it into Drawing Assist again. Now we're going to turn our drawing guide back on, and we're actually going to move. I'm going to put it right here in the middle of the basket, kind of where that egg is. Here, that'll make it a lot easier for you, just to get a nice little shape for you. Let's use the 5th color in the 5th row. Let's outline the top of the basket here. And then holding it down, we'll straighten the shape up. And let's follow along the bottom edge here. Let's close those two ends off. Now using color drop, let's fill it in. Now along this bottom edge here, let's outline this and connect it here at the bottom, just like that. Then let's outline this bottom edge. Now using color drop, let's fill that in, just like that. Now let's use the 6th color in the 5th row, that lighter shade. Starting right here above the edge of the basket. Let's connect it here in the center, just like that. Let's draw the sides. This color will slightly overlap the top here, and then connecting it right in the center. And using color drop and filling that in. Let's turn Drawing Assist off. I'm going to turn our drawing guide off here. Let's add a new layer and put that layer into Soft Light. Let's switch over to the paintbrush now with the damp brush. Let's do around 3% brush size. Actually, let's use full opacity. Now starting on this left-hand side, using a curved paint stroke, but not going all the way to the edge, we're going to paint a line here to create a shadow for the basket. And then we're going to drag it along this bottom edge. And then we're going to finish it on the other side here, kind of creating a very wide smiley face. We're going to put a little bit of shadow color here in the center of the edge of the basket. And then let's repeat this in the middle of the handle for the basket, just like this. Now let's switch over to using the blending tool now with the damp brush. Let's do 3% brush size with around 38% opacity. Now using scrubbing up and down paint strokes, kind of following the curve. Here, we're going to lightly blend this out, softening that edge up just like this, which will also give us just a little bit of light texture for our basket. And then we're going to kind of drag it upwards just a little bit, creating a nice rounded shape. Then we're going to repeat this using horizontal scrubbing paint strokes in the center, kind of softening this middle color up. And then we're going to repeat that along the edge of the handle here. Then we're going to repeat that here in the middle. And then along this side. Now let's turn this layer's opacity down a little bit. Let's turn it down to around 40%. Now let's add a new layer and put that layer into overlay. So use the first color in the first row. Now using back and forth, up and down paint strokes, we're going to add a little bit of highlight color here to the center of the basket. Let's put a little bit along the top edge here. And then let's put a little along the top edge of the handle. And then using the blending tool again, let's lightly blend that out. Just following the lineup of the handle and then blending the highlight on the top of that edge in with the middle and the bottom, just using back and forth scrubbing paint strokes. And then on here, we're just going to kind of using up and down circular scrubbing paint strokes, lightly blend this out. When you get that nicely blended out, let's turn this layer's opacity down just a little bit. Let's turn it down to around about 42% or so. Now we're going to paint the Easter eggs. Let's move our trace outline layer back up. Once the trace outline layer has been moved back to the top, let's add a new layer, and we're going to put that layer underneath of the basket layer. And the reason why I'm putting this layer underneath of the basket layer is so that way when we go to paint the eggs, they're already underneath and they'll appear like they're inside of the basket already. So it saves a lot of work and we don't have to worry about cleaning up the bottom edges. Now let's switch over to using the technical pen again, and let's use 100% size with full opacity. Using the paintbrush. Now we're going to switch over to the second palette, and here are the hex codes for this palette if you still need them. Now using the first color in the first row, the shade of magenta red, let's outline the first egg here just like that, and then hold it down to straighten it up. Then we're going to fill that in. Let's grab the second color in the first row and fill in this middle egg. Outline this edge here, hold it down to correct the shape, and then let's fill that in. Then using the fifth color in the first row, the shade of yellow, we're going to finish off that third egg here, outlining the edge and then holding it down to correct the shape and then filling it in. Let's add another new layer, only we're going to put this layer underneath of that original egg layer, just like that. Using the third color in the first row, that shade of blue, let's fill in this egg here on the left-hand side behind the purple and the red one. Now let's use the fourth color in the first row, the shade of orange, and finish off this egg here. Filling that in just like that. Let's turn our trace outline layer off for just a moment. Let's create another copy canvas layer and paste it over the top. Let's turn our trace outline layer back on. And now you feel free to use any colors that you might like on the eggs. If you want to follow the colors that I did, I will say each color that I use before I fill it in. But feel free to use any color that you like from the palette to fill these eggs in. Let's switch over to the paintbrush again with the technical pen, using full size and full opacity. Let's actually create a new layer on top of the trace outline layer. This will be easier to see the edges here. Let's go ahead and use the first color in the second row. Let's outline this egg here, holding down the shape to correct it, and then let's fill it in. Let's use the first color in the first row and fill in this egg here, and then using color drop to fill it in. Let's use the fifth color in the first row, that shade of yellow, and outline this egg to fill it in. Let's use the second color in the second row, the shade of blue, and outline this egg. And correct the shape, and then use color drop to fill it in. Let's use the second color in the first row. Outline this egg. And fill that in. Let's use the third color in the second row and outline this egg right here and fill that in. Let's grab the sixth color in the first row and outline this egg right here against the bunny and fill that in. Let's use the fourth color in the first row. Outline this egg here. Correct the shape and fill it in. Let's grab the third color in the first row again and fill in this egg shape right here. Fill it in. And then we're going to end with that red color again here on this last egg. Outline this here, correct the shape, and then fill it in. Which gives us all of our Easter eggs here. So let's turn off the trace outline layer for just a moment. Let's add another new layer. Let's put that layer into soft light. We're going to come back down here to the original palette. Let's use the second color in the first row, the shade of black. And let's grab the damp brush again with the paintbrush. About 3% brush size with full opacity. And on each of these eggs, let's just scribble a little bit of color here. Doesn't need to be too perfect, but this will definitely add some shadow and depth to our eggs. We're going to repeat that on all of these eggs. Let's put a little shadow color on the eggs in the basket. Just like that. Now let's use the blending tool now with the damp brush, about 3% brush size, about 40% or so in opacity. And let's lightly, using circular scrubbing paint strokes in the shape of the eggs themselves, let's lightly blend out each of these new shadow colors. Just following the shape of the egg. Once you get that all softened up, let's turn this layer's opacity down just a little bit. Let's turn it down to around 73%. Now let's paint the finishing details. Let's add a new layer and put that layer into soft light. Let's use the second color in the first row. Let's switch over to using the soft airbrush now with the paintbrush. Let's do like 63% brush size with full opacity. Starting on the left-hand side in the top left corner, let's paint a thin line around the edge here, just like this, just going from top to bottom. Real thin, doesn't need to be too thick. Let's paint it along the bottom edge here. And let's paint it along the right side edge. Now we're going to curve the two bottom corners, just like that. Now let's use Gaussian blur. And blur that layer to around 28%. Let's turn this layer's opacity way down. Let's turn it down to like 23%. Let's add a new layer. And let's switch back over to using the technical pen with the paintbrush. Let's do like 35% brush size with full opacity. Let's grab the second color in the fourth row. And on this left side edge, right under the edge, and on this left side, right under the edge of the top of the basket right here, let's paint a line that follows the edge of the basket here. That ends right at the other edge here, just like that. I'm going to make my brush size just a little bit smaller. Let's go to like 28%. Now we're going to paint the bow on the basket, so we're going to start here on the left side and paint an egg shape for the first loop. Let's paint a smaller one here in the center, and then let's paint the right side of the bow here. Now coming off of the bow, we're going to paint two little squiggly lines here, just like this. Let's add a new layer. Put that layer into overlay. Let's use the soft airbrush here. Let's go full size, full opacity. Now using the first color in the first row, let's paint a circle here in the center of the painting, just like this. Now let's use Gaussian blur. And blur that layer to around 87%. Let's turn this layer's opacity down just a little bit. Let's turn it down to around 66%. Let's create another copy canvas and paste. Now let's switch over to the blending tool now with the water pen again, about 3% brush size with full opacity. Now along the bottom edge of the basket, let's add a couple of little grass flicks just to kind of marry the textures together. I'm going to put a couple along the edge of that egg and along that egg here. We're going to repeat that across the edge of most of the eggs here, just doing it very sparingly. And let's put a couple in front of the bunny here, just like that. Okay, so I actually am so glad that I created a copy of this rainbow layer here, so I'm going to create another copy of this. Let's move it back up to the top here. Back over the top, maybe. Let's take this layer and let's put it into hard light. And I'm actually going to turn this down quite a bit. Let's go to like 32% or so. Now let's add one last detail. I almost forgot. Let's zoom up here. Now let's add a new layer. And let's switch over to using the paintbrush now with the technical pen, full size with full opacity. And let's use the first color in the first row, the color white. And let's paint a white dot in the middle of the blue part of the left eye here. And then a white dot in the middle on the left part of the right eye right here. I thought something was missing and I was like, oops, I need to fix that. And now we're done. Now let's sign our work. Thank you so much for watching, friend. I hope you enjoyed this video and the tutorial. I'm wishing you a happy Easter and happy holidays with your family and friends. If you're still in a painting mood, I do have other tutorials now up on my channel, so definitely go check those out. And if you like this video and want to see more content like this in the future, I invite you to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps my channel out, and I'll see you in the next video, friend. Happy painting!